Hi, everybody. John Clay here, VP of Threat Intelligence at Trend Micro, and welcome to my monthly threat webinar series. I've been doing these for, I don't know, 7+ years now. And this month is June 2022. I'm going to be covering business email compromise today. As always, we'll be recording this. So if you have colleagues or friends you think can benefit from watching this, we will post it and have access to it on demand afterwards. You as a participant will get access to the slides and also there's a Q&A button. If you have any questions that come up during the session, I'll take those at the end. If I don't get to your question, I apologize now, but I will contact you outside via email. So that we can get you the answer. This is an interesting topic that we're going to be covering today. If you look at it, just reading, one of the reasons I'm doing this one is the FBI did a public service announcement back in early May, on business email compromise. You can see here some of the numbers. They actually, since June of 2016, have had over almost 250,000 incidents reported to them, and at a cost of $43 billion over that time frame. So this threat has been a problem for quite some time. I did a session on it last year as part of this series, but I'm covering a different area of business email compromise this time. So, we'll talk about that as we go through some of the slides. I wanted to highlight, though, that there's definitely a difference. Obviously, ransomware gets a lot of attention, and it's been getting a lot of attention over the years, mainly because it's a very open threat. It's a noisy threat. It's very visible. It's one of the only visible threats that you see that affect organizations or affect systems. So when a ransomware malware hits a system, you end up getting a pop-up screen on the system with the ransom note. If you pretty much know you have ransomware when you get that pop-up screen. Most of the threats out there today are silent. You don't see them. They're running in the background of the system. But obviously, ransomware is one of those that's very visible, very noisy, very loud. Unlike business email compromise, that tends to be, very interesting because it tends to be email based, obviously, but in many cases, there's no attachment, there's no URL associated with it. It simply has a socially engineered content that asks the victim to wire transfer money to them. And unfortunately, it's been effective over the years. And you can see from the IC3 2021 report that they publish these reports every year, and it shows all the different types of cyber threats that are targeting their people around the world. But you can see here in 2021, business email compromise, there were almost 20,000 complaints, with an adjusted loss of nearly $2.4 billion. And again, I said, ransomware is getting all this publicity out there, but if you look at it, there's not even a comparison in terms of the losses. Only almost $50 million in losses of ransomware, of 3,700 plus complaints. So a massive difference there. And I think a lot of people don't realize that business email compromise is such a big financial burden on a lot of organizations. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to share this information again to my audience and let you know what's going on. So let's talk a little bit about this. We also see this, this comes from our regular reports that we've been doing. Our 2021 Roundup report, you can see here, from 2018 to 2021, overall business email compromise. It went up in 2019, down a little bit in 2020, but there was a spike in 2021. So we are definitely seeing an increase in business email compromise types of attacks. Obviously, there are lots. The numbers tend to be a little bit smaller from our perspective. We're blocking a lot of them, a lot of these threats for our customers, and I'll talk about technologies later. But certainly, One of the types of business email compromise, CEO fraud, you can see here, that's kind of maintained a little bit steady, more steady of the numbers year over year. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But certainly this threat is a big challenge for a lot of organizations, just because it tends to hit them financially a lot more so than, let's say, ransomware. Obviously, the big ransomware attacks you're seeing, you see ransoms in the millions, or multi-million-dollar ransom notes that you're seeing. But again, business email compromise dwarfs ransomware by quite a bit. So what is it? There's a couple of different types of business email compromise. And in my last year's webinar, which you can find on demand, I went through these in pretty in-depth. Like I said, I'm going to cover a different topic today, but I wanted to give you just a quick overview, review of what these are. The first one is the bogus invoice. So you see this happening where they send an invoice to you or to some of your suppliers, purporting to be you, and they get the recipient then to wire transfer the invoice money to their bank accounts. The second is CEO fraud. This is probably the bigger one that we see, where they impersonate your C-level executives, and they send the email internally to your employees, and requesting, again, typically it's wire transfers of money, but it could also be requests for personal information, employee information, that kind of thing, tax information, that stuff as well. Account compromises, obviously, this is a big one that we're starting to see. Even ransomware actors are looking to compromise accounts, but in this case, it's mostly email accounts, because they then allows them to do some things, and we'll talk about that further. Attorney impersonation is one. We don't see a lot of this, but it does happen out there, where they impersonate your attorneys. Many times it's getting funds from third-party counsels that you employ as an organization. So they'll send it from your attorney to the other one, and requesting funds or something like that, or information. And then data theft. Obviously, there's a data theft component in a lot of these, because they may want to target different types of threats against you. So they try to obtain data from you as part of these business email compromise attacks as well. So that's the main types of business email compromise we see. But this time I wanted to highlight the different email services that are used by these actors. And you can see here, there's 5 different types that we're going to be covering today. Free email services, local email services, encrypted email services, self-registered domains and directed to featured email services, and stolen email credentials and conversations. So let's get into each of these. I have an example of an actual business email compromise email that we identified that was targeting our customers. And so you can see here, you'll see these on each of these different slides that I have covering these different email services. So free email services, you can see this is one here. In this case, it's using Gmail. In this case, it's, I'd like to update my direct deposit info. So this is one that we're seeing quite often, where it's being sent to HR or finance internally, and it's from an employee, and the employee is asking them to change their direct deposit for their paychecks. And we've seen this quite often as well. If you're going to be looking to train your employees about the different types of business email compromise, this is one certainly that you should be alerting your HR or your finance team to, because it is going to be using. So why do I use it? Free email, obviously there's a low cost to entry. There's no cost really. I can use free email services whenever I want. And so that's certainly a benefit to the actors behind it. They don't have to give up any money to utilize these services. It's trusted marketing quality. So a lot of these free services offer a number of tools and capabilities with them. So again, that gives them a benefit of doing it, whether it's tracking services or whatever it might be. And the service typically promises the confidentiality in terms of protecting legitimate users. So if they use these, the service is offering the privacy, so that if law enforcement or somebody else tries to get information, they may not deliver that. So again, it's the use of these free services is a benefit to the malicious actors behind it. Also, bulk account creation tools can be used, so they can utilize that if they want to send out bulk emails as part of this. These tend to be a little bit more targeted in approach, and as well as targeted in nature. So the bulk email usually isn't used as often, but it is available to them if they decide they wanted to use that. Now, some of the main free services that we have seen: Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook. Those are the top choices that we've seen used by the BEC actors out there. So understand that, if you see a lot of Gmail, Hotmail, Outlook domain emails coming into your organization, again, they could definitely be legitimate from external users, but certainly understand that malicious actors are going to use those in most cases. Some of the tactics that they use, obviously, big one is spoofing your employees' names. So, instead of getting access to the employee account, they just spoof that email address. A lot of times this is definitely used in the CEO fraud. So they will spoof your executive's email. Obviously, they can find out how you the format of your email addresses within your organization are used, and so they can craft these regularly. So usually you'll see these being utilized by them. Personal emails. So again, if they do their due diligence, maybe they find out from social media scanning that you have some friends that you're associated with. So they may spoof a friend's email address, sending it to you, thinking so that you as an employee may think it's coming from your friend. One of the other things is requesting the payroll deposit. So this is another one that you can see the example here as well. And then the use of some of the account naming conventions that they use. They use office, they use president, chief, director. You can see that in this. These are the 10 most commonly used emails that we saw as part of the business email compromises in 2021. You can see chief executive office at Gmail, chief executive officer at Gmail, director, executive officer, office president, office pro, office project, office work. You can see always trying to be look like it's coming from an organization or a person within that organization. And you can see these are all examples using Gmail. As I said, Gmail is probably one of the most popular free email services using as well out there. Hotmail is the second one, and Outlook as well. So you can see that from this. One thing we did observe, though, is what's interesting is some of these addresses were actually active from anywhere from a couple of days to even some of these were done in over years. They've been using the same exact free email address in their campaigns. So these actors aren't new actors. They've been doing BEC for quite a long time, and they use what continually works. One aspect you have to understand with business email compromise, and this may happen across all the different types of BEC types that happen, is an idea called grooming, and that's where they actually want to build a email conversation with the victim. So they will have a back and forth with the victim to try to develop some trust, so that the employee thinks this is a legitimate person. It's the person they think they're talking to, and they build that trust. So you can see an example of this one using an Outlook.com address. Happy I got your response. Sorry to bother you with this message, but got no choice. I got a gift card for my niece, and due to the pain and having it on my knees now, I even find it hard to walk. Can you help them get that from for me and get that, and I'll pay you back, so to speak. So those are kind of things we also see where gift cards are being requested by a supervisor and have the employee buy it for them, and then they will pay them back. Obviously, they never get paid back in this case. But the grooming piece, you're going to understand that there could be multiple email exchanges with the victim and the malicious actor over time as part of these email compromise, business email compromise attacks. Now, local email services, why am I going to look at that? So again, this tends to be some regional based. So if I'm in a regional world where there is a local service available, I may be more familiar with that service. I may think it's a trusted and legitimate email coming from these local services. There's an ease of use aspect to it. You can see on the left here some examples of it. Do you have a moment? I am tied up in a conference call meeting, and there's something I need you to do and take care of, requiring swift action. So again, when you look at these emails, they tend to come from an executive or somebody trusted, and the theme inside the email is many times similar. So it's going to say, I'm tied up in a meeting. So one, they try to make sure that you're not going to call them to verify, because they're going to say, I don't have my phone with me. So, but I need to have this thing done urgently. So it's going to be an urgent request, need you to transfer funds quickly, take care of this for me, that kind of thing. In the second one, I need you, send me an aging report due within the next 30 days and a month overdue. So there's some, again, criticality aspect of it. It's important. In this case, they're looking for some information, right? Data versus a wire transfer. So again, that could be the goal or the motive of the actor behind it in this case. Some of the tactics that we see, compromise legitimate accounts. So they could be compromising the people that are using these local email services and use those compromised accounts. They can create new accounts anytime they want, obtain personal information for use in future attacks as part of these campaigns, like the second one you see here on the screen at the bottom. But these local email services, again, is a way to obfuscate potentially or make the victim think that they are legitimate emails when they actually aren't. These are some of the email services we see in different countries. So you can see in United Kingdom, virginmedia.com, United States, we see optimum.net. The Czech is seznam.cz. Germany, it's mail.com, and South Korea, it's naver.com. We saw actually more than 15 countries' local email services used in BEC attacks. So there's a lot of these countries, again, if they're going to target a specific country, tend to look at utilizing one of the popular local email services within that country. The next type is encrypted email services. So certainly, as we all know, encryption is a good obfuscation technique. It allows them to hide their footprints. It prevents systems from tracking them in many cases. There's a higher level of security features that you can see. You can see in this example here, the actor hides the actual email address, CEO of at Proton Mail in the reply to section. So they are obfuscating that and using these encrypted services. Some of the tactics, the emails found in the from email header, hidden in the reply to. So just like you see here, it's in the reply to section. And one of the common tricks they're going to use is forging the from header. So you get the email message as a individual, and you see the from. They tend to forge that or spoof it, where their actual email, who they want to communicate to, is in the reply button. And a lot of times in these types of scenarios, the victim may not even realize that. So when they click reply and they reply to it, it actually goes to the criminal, the malicious actor, instead of going to what should be the from person, the from address. So they utilize that tactic as well. Some of the more popular encrypted email services that we see: Proton Mail, Tutanota, and Cryptex.com. These are some of the ones that we see more often used in BEC attacks around the world. Another type of email service is the self-registered domains and direct to featured email services. You can see on the left here some of the, when they self-register domains, obviously they can't use your domain. So what they're going to do is register domains that are similar to yours. You can see some of the examples here using the small letter L for the capital letter I. A one, for example, so you can see here example.com versus examp1e.com. You can see using a zero, zero for an O. A D is represented by CL. M is represented by RN. I is for J, G for Q, U for V, W is represented by VV. Some of these tactics, these are some of the tactics they can do. So they can create these lookalike domains that may fool recipients thinking it is a domain, that a legitimate domain that they're receiving from. They can also use these legitimate domains or self-registered domains to control positive email authentication results that a lot of organizations are using SPF or domain keys, DKIM, and it can now help deceive those and fool those into thinking these are legitimate domains. Another use is the use of dashes and periods to separate a word. So you can see example.com, they may use example-tw.com. Instead, and again, people may not realize that it's not the correct domain. They just think it's the legitimate domain that is being used. Another option that we see is stolen email credentials and conversations. This is one is probably becoming more utilized by most of these folks. Just because if I steal credentials of somebody, the accounts that they are accessing now are typically very trusted, right? It's the actual email account of the victim in this case. So if they're able to compromise, let's say, one of your executives' email accounts, they can send email from that account to your employees or to a third-party supplier of yours, and it's actually coming from that account. So it makes it difficult, obviously, to identify, because you're not going to see that it's coming from maybe a self-registered domain, or it's coming from a domain that's a lookalike domain. You may be able to identify a spoofed email. The reply may be different from where in these cases it is going to be legitimate. It's going to be from that. So even if they get a conversation going, they can manage that conversation because they have access to the account. So for example, they could set up rules in the account on the account email account, and anything to their domain, for example, may get rerouted to them. So the actual email won't go into the inbox of the executive. That actually gets rerouted to them instead, and then they can have that conversation. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's some, in this case, outstanding payment is the subject. A lot of times they also are now able to utilize existing conversations that are being done by the victim and somebody else. Could be a supplier, could be another employee inside the organization, but they hijack those conversations and they can use it against you. So you can see here why using it. Obviously, they're trusted accounts. It improves their success. Some of the tactics that we see: deploying a spam campaign with malicious attachments. They'll use keyloggers or Trojan stealers in this case. We've seen LockyBit, we've seen Ferrite, Negasteel are some of the ones that we see there. We also, so they can do spam campaigns. So again, this is where they may look at doing more bulk email to a bunch of people because again, it's coming from a legitimate email account. We also see them looking at stealing credentials in applications like browsers, SMTP protocols, file transfer protocols from the system. So a lot of times you may see them harvest credentials from the account once they get access, and they can get things. The other aspect obviously is now they have contacts information. So they got all your contacts because they're in your email account. So then they can target other victims out there as part of this attack. You can manipulate the account, as I mentioned, but also you can manipulate some of these attachments. So if there's a existing email conversation with an attachment, they could actually get that attachment and manipulate it. So for example, on the left-hand side, they could manipulate the outstanding payment, so the invoice. So and how they would manipulate that typically is they would change the banking information, routing information in that invoice and have it get sent to them. So then they could, send another email saying, "Oh, hey, we had a mistake in the last one. Here's the new information for you. Please make sure the payment goes to the new information." So that kind of aspect of it as well. Some of the times we see also them renting virtual private servers with SMTP and RDP services as well, so they can utilize those in some of the conversations, some of the attacks that they see as well. A lot of times these what we call man-in-the-middle attacks can happen and cause lots of damage for organizations. And again, the biggest challenge you have with this type of an attack is that it is coming from a legitimate email account. So, and I'll talk a little bit here in a little while on some of the new technologies that you might want to look at that can help identify this type of an attack or a threat. Some of the other observations that we've seen with business email compromise is the use of lengthy domain names. So we saw an actor group out of Africa that you can see here some examples of some of the domain names where they had, admin-office-mail-server-ssio.management. So crazy how this works, but it seems to be successful, right? So they using some new generic top-level domain words such as .management, .work, .one, lots of those kind of things we're seeing happening. Africa has tended to be one of the more prolific areas where business email compromise actors reside. They've gotten very good at it. Obviously, they started with the whole Nigerian prince type of scams, but they've definitely evolved from there. Business email compromise is probably one of the most popular now. They do a lot of romance scams in that out of that region as well, but BEC certainly is favored by the African actors. Some of the other ones we see use of telecom keywords. So registering domain names with telecommunications industry related keywords. So you can see 5G-Verizon, network-sprint.biz, sprint-mobile.net. So again, trying to trick the employee thinking these are legitimate domains coming from the telecom, and people are familiar with a lot of the telecom companies. So they try to, they will register domains that are similar to those in hopes of that the victim doesn't recognize that it may not be the legitimate company or not. So that's a challenge. So, obviously Verizon and T-Mobile are some of the big ones that we see a lot of domains registered, fraudulent domains registered as part of that. And you can see another example here. I hope you're doing well. This is a difficult period. How is business currently going in Canada? Have you received a phone call from my lawyer this morning or yesterday. It concerns an important subject for your company. Please let me know as soon as you read this email. And again, this is one of those grooming emails. So they want to start the conversation with the victim, try to build a rapport, build a relationship with them. The last one I wanted to highlight on some of these is who they're targeting. Again, definitely high profile users within your organization. So your executives will be spoofed in many cases. Finance, people in finance are going to be, because again, one of the big goals of BEC is to get wire transfers going. So your finance group is going to be targeted, obviously. So that's one of the groups within your organization that you really should put together a concerted effort to educate and train about the business email compromise tactics that are going to be used against them. But also we see a lot of employees that can be found on social media networks. So if you have employees that are very prolific in social media, they will definitely target those victims as well, because they can get a lot more information about them. They can do the open source intelligence gathering about that person. And like I mentioned, maybe they'll find out their names of friends so that they can utilize spoofed messages coming from their friends, or they could even target those friends and try to compromise their accounts so that they can then send it from those accounts. All that information. So it, again, used to spoof and trick those employees into clicking or opening or doing taking action on the emails that they send. We definitely believe that these actors are going to continue adopting these new services. So as new email services come out or new mediums that they can utilize in targeting BEC, will definitely, BEC may evolve from email into other mediums of communications. We actually are starting to see BEC in being used in some of the like Zoom accounts and those like we're using today. So you can see that they're starting to target employees opening up team calls or opening up Zoom calls with them and fooling them into it. They're using some of the tactics. They're using things to make it sound like their voice, impersonating voices, etc. Those kind of tactics as well are starting to show up as part of this. Europe and America still seem to be the biggest targets for business email compromise around the world. Obviously, a lot of companies in both regions, a lot of people that they can target, finance groups that they can target, and lots of money out of these companies. And again, we're likely to see this, especially with the remote work now. A lot of employees are at home, working from home. So, and again, now you're starting to blur personal with work. So, home users are probably more likely to check their personal email accounts or as well as their business email accounts, so they can target and utilize, again, through social open source intelligence gathering. They may figure out their personal email, so they may do something with the personal email to target them. All right, let's go into some of the defense strategies. And again, if you have any questions, certainly feel free to pop those into the Q&A. But let's talk a little bit about defense strategies. So when you think about it, I'm going to do more of a high level today on this. There's really four key pillars to cybersecurity strategy, and I employ you to focus on all four of these as in your organization, because if you do this, it will definitely help build out a better overall security posture within your organization. So the first area is your people. You need to build training and awareness of this threat. And just cybersecurity in general, right? So a cybersecurity security awareness program, if you haven't implemented one, I suggest that you build one where you're regularly training your employees on the different types of threats. Business email compromise should definitely be one of the threats that you are training your employees. And like I said, you want to definitely target some of those key employees that are going to be targeted as a victim. So your finance, your HR, your executives, definitely those groups are going to be more targeted than others in business email compromise attacks. Um, Professional skills and qualifications, this applies not only to just your general employees, but also your administrators, right? So who is building the security? Do you have expertise in the security products that you're utilizing? Have you been trained on those? Competent people and resources. Obviously, there's a skills gap that we're experiencing now around the world. So I know it's difficult to get new talent out there that have trained on a lot of these things, but certainly that's where you can also look at potentially a managed service for you to help offset some of the shortages that you may have within your organization. But certainly people is a big aspect, right? And again, a lot of these attacks start at the employee level, and it's targeting people, definitely targeting people. So it's not necessarily targeting a system in this case. They're targeting people with socially engineered attacks and trying to get the people to do things that they normally do, but shouldn't be doing it to this particular group. So like, people wire transfer all the time from your organization. We just have to understand that they have to recognize that they are wire transferring to a fraudulent account or a malicious person's account versus a legitimate account. Process. Look at your processes that you have in place. What is your governance, your policy, your framework? Which framework are you using? Are you using a NIST framework, or are you using something else? Your management systems, your best practices. Audit your email on a regular basis to identify, are we seeing these types of attacks? Look at your email security logs to see, are we detecting business email compromise attacks? If we are, good. If we're not seeing those, maybe it's something you need to look at. Maybe you're limiting what technologies you have available in your email security stack. So look at the process. Also, do you have a process for your employees to forward suspicious emails to your IT group to identify, to do a better look at, is this a legitimate email or not? Make sure you have those processes in place, and what is the process for the employee to do that and maintain that. Technology, certainly as a technology vendor, this is a big area for us. What technology do you need? Do you need to test them, verify them, validate them? How often are you patching them? Making sure that the advanced detection technologies are enabled. The deployment, obviously it requires competent people, support processes, and an overall plan. So look at your technology. How many products do you have? Can you consolidate to a single vendor or just a couple of vendors? Are you covering all your different aspects of your email? Is it looking at email from outside to inside and inside to outside, but also is it looking at is your security product looking at internal emails? Because again, if I compromise an internal email account, maybe it's not going to go through some of the security controls that you have in your perimeter or in the stuff that's going in and out of the internet. So take a look at that as well. And then lastly, and this is, most people talk about people process technology, right? That's your risk when you look at risk, but culture is another thing that you want to think about. You got to create that cyber culture or this, culture of security is important to everyone inside the organization. It's going to be an uphill battle if the only people that care about security is your security folks. Everybody in the organization has to think about security. So as they're going through their email messages in the morning, every employee should be cognizant and thinking about, could this be a scam? Could this be a scam? Could this be a BEC email versus just going through their emails to get their email inbox whittled down from the overnight emails that they may have gotten. And this really requires a top level approach, right? So you need to make sure that your executive staff is on board with this, and if you're a public company, your board is aware of the situation, because certainly you want to look at. Another area, I didn't touch on this, but it can be part of this discussion here, is cyber insurance. Talk to your cyber, if you have cyber insurance, talk to your cyber insurance about the ability to get paid if a business email compromise account happens. Make sure you have direct access to your bank account. So if somebody does do a wire transfer, and all of a sudden, maybe in the back of their mind, they think, ooh, that might not have been the right thing to do, you can contact your bank, your financial institution, and maybe get that stopped as quickly as possible. So make sure they're on speed dial. Make sure that also, if you are a victim, obviously contact the FBI or IC3, because the more we can get information about these attacks and how many attacks we're having, it's difficult to have the conversation, because a lot of people out there may think, oh, it's not a big deal, I probably won't get targeted. But certainly, as you saw from the data that the FBI has processed, $43 billion in losses over the last 6 years, roughly. So a lot of money lost by this threat. Now, from a technology, I'd be off if I didn't talk a little bit about technology coming from a technology vendor. I would recommend you get with your security vendor soon and talk about your email security vendor and talk about the capabilities and whether you have all the best practices running to ensure that you are able to detect all these different types of threats, whether it's phishing, whether it's spam, whether it's business email compromise, whether it's weaponized attachments. You can see here, this is an example of a layered messaging security. So lots of different technologies are represented here across the board. So whether it's email sender reputation, DKIM, for example, anti-malware, you got static anti-malware. So again, pattern-based, which still works, still detects stuff. But then you have behavioral based, you have macro detections, document exploits. So if there's a document, a PDF attached, and it's got an exploit inside that they're trying to utilize, you can detect those. Socially engineered protection. The one I wanted to highlight here is writing style DNA. That's a technology that Trend Micro has developed using AI and some machine learning, where we can actually look at the writing style of the individual. And over the course of, I don't know what it is, like 200 emails that we analyze, we build a view of how that person writes their emails. So if an account is compromised, let's say it's your CEO's account is compromised, and the actors craft an email and send it to somebody inside. If they don't craft it in the writing style of your CEO, we can actually flag that and alert your organization, alert the sender, and alert the recipient that hey, this may be a fraudulent email. And so that's a technology if you have not enabled yet, you should definitely look at enabling that. You may not want to enable it for all of your employees, but certainly your high profile employees, your executive teams, maybe your finance, HR, etc. But then you keep going, anti-spam, gateway web reputation, also sandboxing. So if you add a sandbox capability, so if there's an attachment, you can send it to a sandbox and have it explode and see if it's a weaponized attachment or not. So that's another layer of protection that you can think about doing. So all of these are features and functionalities that are available inside the Trend Micro suite of email security, like our cloud app security that runs in Office 365, or our gateway products, whatever they might be. But definitely contact your security vendor and talk to them about what their capabilities are. Make sure you have all the latest and greatest best practices running so that you can detect as much as possible. So just to highlight, again, if you have any questions, I'm going to take to those here in just a second. I also, like I mentioned, I've been doing these webinars for 7 years. If there's a topic that you're interested in me covering in the next, several months, or feel free to drop that in the chat. I'd love to hear from you, the audience, on what topics you'd like me to cover in the future, because certainly over 7 years I've covered a wide range of products or topics. I've also repeated myself quite often, because certainly there's threats like business email compromise and ransomware, which there's always new things happening with those. But certainly if there's an area that you'd like to see, feel free to throw that into the chat. But Trend Micro One, that's our new unified cybersecurity platform that we are very happy and excited to utilize and have our customers utilize, where we're able to take our XDR, extended detection and response, that uses EDR, NDR, cloud, network layer, cloud layer, messaging layer. And we can feed all that intelligence into our artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities to identify threats much faster and give you better visibility around it using our Vision One console. So that's all I had today. Again, we've been around for many, many years. In fact, we pioneered email security. We have a patent on email security for SMTP. We were the first company to come out with it. I remember when I joined Trend Micro almost 26 years ago, we were protecting CC mail and MS mail, and we were, which were the precursors to a lot of the email systems today. So we've been protecting email for upwards of 30 years. So it's been a heck of a journey, and the threats are always going to change, and we'll change with them and protect you with them. So if you'd like to talk to us, we'd be happy to take a look at that. So let me open up the question. Let's see, Michael is asking, regarding lookalike domains, are you seeing the perpetrators use the tactic with the recipient being a smartphone user? The thought is to send the BEC email after hours during weekends when emails have a greater likelihood of being read on a smartphone. Yeah, certainly, Michael. Again, as I mentioned before, the medium is going to shift and change as technology changes. And so, phishing, for example, we're seeing a lot of SMS phishing happening now, and the actors are starting to see that. So it's certainly, it is, I haven't seen specifically them utilizing this, but I can see in the future where, your finance person, they identify your finance person and somehow they find out their phone number, and they could send a text to them saying, hey, this is from the CEO or CFO. I need you to wire transfer the money to this account. Please do it. I'm at a meeting, or I'm at an event. I can't get to you via phone, so I thought I'd text you real quick. That kind of thing. I can definitely see that happening in the future. So certainly, I would suggest when you train your employees just to recognize whether it's an email or whether it's a text or whatever, any kind of request to your employees to wire transfer money or transfer data to the person requesting it. First and foremost, do a two-factor verification, right? Call that person. Pick up the phone. My brother owns a company, and his finance person got a BEC email, and the first thing they did was just picked up the phone and talked to my brother and said, hey, did you initiate this? And he was like, no, I did not. And they were able to squash it. So, I didn't mention the verification process, but that's one of the best ways to eliminate this threat, is with that, which is why you see in a lot of cases the email will say, I'm in a meeting and it can't be bothered, so please don't call me. Well, again, if you get those emails, I would still call. It could always go to voicemail, but don't do the action until you get confirmation via that second factor verification process. So that's another good tactic for you to utilize. Sorry, my dogs are going a little crazy. Work from home challenges, right? But in any case, yes, definitely going to see that kind of thing. Let's see if we have any questions in the chat. again, this recording will be available afterwards. Once we're done with this, you'll receive an email with the slides for your use. If you want to share those within your organization, feel free. But you'll also get access to the on-demand link so that if you have colleagues or friends that you think would benefit from watching this, be happy to do that as well. So one person is asking about the MITRE ATT&CK framework in the future. So certainly that's something I'm thinking about doing as well. One other item I wanted to just highlight, if you've been following me on, and I used to do this in this actual webinar, is I would have one of my first slides was talking about this week in security or this month in security. I had a blog post every Friday that was called This Week in Security, where I posted a number of topics, articles that came up or information about Trend Micro, what we published for the week. And I've stopped doing that because we're doing more video. And my colleague Ed Cabrera, who's our chief cybersecurity officer, and I are now doing a bi-weekly video. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Trend Talks BizSec. That's BIZSEC. And we're taking on different topics, and we do a quick 15-minute talk about different topics. So like the last one I did was on cyber warfare. I had spoken at the World Economic Forum on a panel about cyber warfare. And Ed and I actually took on some topics of cyber warfare that we didn't get to cover in that panel. So like cyber mercenaries and their use in cyber warfare and what we think is going to happen in the future with that. So take a look at that as well. But thank you, everybody, for attending today. I appreciate it, as always. Look forward to having another monthly threat webinar next month. So July, that'll be an anniversary for me. I'm going to be 26 years at Trend Micro and in cybersecurity. July is my anniversary of getting into this industry. It's been a fabulous industry over the years. I'm very happy with it. But thank you for sure for attending today, and have a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.